Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here, back for another chapter reading of John Krakauer's Under the Banner of Heaven, a story of violent faith. Go ahead and hit the like button as we jump into chapter 5. The Second Great Awakening. The sober preacher trained in the dialects of seminary was rare west of the Appalachians. One fountain said faith healers and circuit rider evangelists who stared their audiences to paroxysms of religious frenzy. The revivals, by their excess, deadened a normal antipathy toward religious eccentricity. And these Pentecostal years, which coincided with Joseph Smith's adolescence and early manhood, were the most fertile in America's history for the spouting of prophets. This is Fawn Brody. No man knows my history. Shortly after the rescue of Elizabeth Smart and the arrest of Brian David Mitchell, FBI agents discovered a 27-page booklet Mitchell had written 2 months before he had abducted Elizabeth, titled The Book of Emmanuel David Isaiah. It purported to be a divine manifesto as revealed to Emmanuel Mitchell, announcing the inauguration of a new fundamentalist church, the Seven Diamonds Plus One, which would serve as a brilliant, shining diadem of truth. The tract identified Emmanuel Mitchell as the one mighty and strong, and proclaimed that God had ordained him to lead the new church, the true and living church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, in its purified and exalted state. The book of Emmanuel David Isaiah also explained that God had transferred the keys and powers and ordinances of the holy priesthood for salvation of mankind through a succession of prophets. The booklet traced this divinely ordained lineage from Adam to Noah to Abraham to Moses to Jesus unto Joseph Smith Jr., and from Joseph Smith Jr. unto Emmanuel David Isaiah, and from Emmanuel David Isaiah unto the end of the earth. It's amazing how everybody just has this way when they're all, prophets and things of that nature, when it comes to cults and stuff, to connect themselves to these figures that are supposed to be, yeah. And I'm gonna leave it alone. To comprehend Brian David Mitchell, or to comprehend Dan Lafferty or Tom Green, or the polygamous inhabitants of Bountiful and Colorado City, one must first understand the faith these people have in common, a faith that gives shape and purpose to every facet of their lives. And any such understanding must begin with the aforementioned Joseph Smith Jr., the founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. More than a century and a half after his passing, the sheer force of Joseph's personality still holds extraordinary sway over Mormons and Mormon fundamentalists alike. I admire Joseph Smith, affirms Dan Lafferty, his eyes burning. I admire nobody else as much. Whether one believes that the faith he spawned is the world's only true religion or a preposterous fable, Joseph emerges from the fog of time as one of the most remarkable figures ever to have breathed American air. Whatever his lapses, Harold Bloom argues in The American Religion, Smith was an authentic religious genius, unique in our national history. I don't know about all that, but in proportion to his importance and his complexity, he remains the least studied personage of an undiminished vitality in our entire national saga. Joseph was born on December 23rd, 1805, in the Green Mountains of Vermont. His father, Joseph Smith Sr., was a tenant farmer, perpetually on the lookout for his main chance, who had lost all his money a short while earlier in a failed scheme to export ginseng root to China. Finding himself broke and saddled with a crushing debt, Smith was reduced to scraping out a meager living from a plot of rocky, barely cultivable farmland rented in Ignomy, Ignominy, from his father-in-law. New England was then in the midst of an extended economic depression, and penury dogged the Smith family throughout the childhood of Joseph Jr. Constantly searching for better prospects, the family moved 5 times during the boy's first 11 years before settling in Palmyra, 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 a town of 4,000 in western New York in western New York beside the Erie Canal, which at the time was under construction. The canal was the most ambitious engineering venture of that area and had sparked a robust, if temporary, boom in the local economy. Joseph Sr. hoped to be a beneficiary of this uptick. Here is how Joseph Smith clan is described upon their arrival in Palmyra in 1817. In a typically snide article about the budding prophet published in a local newspaper, The Reflector, on February 1st, 1831, as Joseph's new religion began to make a splash. Joseph Smith Sr., the father of the personage of whom we are now writing, had by misfortune or otherwise been reduced to extreme poverty before he migrated to Western New York. His family was large, consisting of 9 or 10 children, among whom Joe Jr. was the 3rd or 4th in succession. We have never been able to learn that any of the family were ever noted for much else than ignorance and stupidity, to which might be added, so far as it may respect the elder branch, a propensity to superstition and a fondness for everything marvelous. The latter characterization refers to the spiritual enthusiasm of the Smith parents, particularly the prophet's mother, Lucy Mack Smith. Lucy had a vigorous but unschooled mind, observed Fawn Brodie in No Man Knows My History, her magnificent, contentious biography of Joseph Smith. Lucy especially was devout to the mysticism so often found among those suddenly released from the domination and discipline, of a church. She accepted a highly personalized God to whom she would talk as if he were a member of the family circle. Her religion was intimate and homely, with God a ubiquitous presence, invading dreams, provoking miracles, and blighting sinners' fields. Young Joseph Smith's theological proclivities clearly owed much to Lucy, and just as clearly both mother and son were hugely influenced by the tenor of the times. Following the Revolutionary War, the new public was jarred by a period of ecclesiastical turmoil during which the established churches were viewed by a large segment to populate as spiritually bankrupt. The flood of religious experimentation that rolled the United States during the first decades of the 19th century, christened the Second Great Awakening, was roughly to the religious upheaval that swept the country in the 1970s. In the early 1800s, the ferment was especially strong near the nation's expanding frontiers, including Western New York, where the religious fervor flared with such intensity that the area around Palmyra, hope I'm saying that right, Palmyra, became known as the Burnt Over District. People imagined the acrid scent of brimstone in the air. Acrid scent of brimstone in the air. The apocalypse seemed just around the corner. Never in the history of Western society had the millennium seemed so imminent. The Mormon historian Hiram L. Andrews, Andrus, has written, "Never before had people looked so longingly and hopefully for its advent. It was expected that 20 years or less would see the dawn of that peaceful era. It was in this superheated, anything goes religious climate that Joseph Smith gave birth to what would become America's most successful homegrown faith. An earnest, good-natured kid with a low boredom threshold, Joseph Jr. had no intention of becoming a debt-plagued farmer like his father, toiling in the dirt year in and year out. His talents called for much grander arena. Although he received no more than a few years of formal schooling as a boy, by all accounts he possessed a nimble mind and an astonishing imagination. Like many autodidacts, he was drawn to the big questions. He spent long hours reflecting on the nature of the divine, pondering the meaning of life and death, assessing the merits and shortcomings of the myriad competing faiths of the day. Gregarious, athletic, and good-looking, he was a natural whom both men and women found immensely charming. His enthusiasm was infectious. He could sell a muzzle to a dog. People like that are dangerous when it comes to faith. Let me keep going. The line separating religion from superstition can be indistinct, and this was especially true during the theological chaos of the Second Great Awakening, in which Joseph came of age. The future prophet's spiritual curiosity moved him to explore far and wide on both sides of that blurry line, including an extended foray into the necro. Oh, Lord, I done butchered that. necromantic. Is that neochromatic or necromantic? I have no clue. Arts. More specifically, he devoted much time and energy to attempting to divine the location of buried treasure by means of black magic and crystal gazing activities he learned from his father. Several years later, he would renounce his dabbling in the occult, but Joseph's flirtation with folk magic as a young man had a direct and unmistakable bearing on the religion he would soon usher forth. Yeah, anytime you look into a rock and stuff is revealed, I bet it did. Although money digging, as the custom was known, was illegal, it was nevertheless a common practice among the Hoi Polo. I know I'm saying that right. The HOI, first word, POLLOI of New England and upstate New York. The woods surrounding Palmyra were riddled with Indian burial mounds that held ancient bones and artifacts, some of which were crafted from precious or semi-precious metals. It therefore comes as no surprise that a boy with Joseph's hyperactive mind and dreamy nature would hatch schemes to get rich by unearthing the gold rumored to be buried in the nearby hills and fields. Joseph's money digging began in earnest a few months shy of his 14th birthday, 2 years after his family's arrival in Palmyra, when he heard about the talents of a girl named Sally Chase, who lived near the Smith family farm. Upon learning that she possessed a magical rock, a peepstone or seer stone, that allowed her to see anything, however hidden from others, Joseph bothered his parents until they let him pay the girl a visit. I'm listening to this, right? And all I keep thinking about is how this man managed to create a world of bondage for women, all through looking in a rock. Sally's peepstone turned out to be a small greenish rock. She placed it in the bottom of an upturned hat, then instructed Joseph to bury his face in the hat so as to exclude the light. When he did so, he was treated to magical visions. One of the things that appeared to him was a pocket-sized white-colored stone a great way off. It became luminous and dazzled his eyes, and after a short time it became as intense as the midday sun. He immediately understood that this rock was another peepstone. The vision also indicated its precise location underground, beneath a small tree. Joseph located the tree, started digging, and with some labor and exertion, unearthed the first of at least 3 peepstones he would possess in his lifetime. His career as a scryer, that is to say, a diviner or crystal gazer, was launched. Soon, his neochromatic skills were sufficiently in demand that he was able to command respectable fees to find buried treasures for property owners throughout the region. By 1825, his renown was such that an elderly farmer named Josiah Stowell came from Pennsylvania to meet Joseph and was so impressed by the encounter that he hired the 20-year-old to travel with him to the... Alexa, how do you pronounce Susquehanna?
I pronounce that Susquehanna, but I'm always...
Alexa, stop. The Susquehanna Valley to locate with his peepstones a hidden lode of silver rumored to have been mined by the Spaniards centuries earlier. Stowell paid Joseph the generous salary of $14 a month. Woo! A whole $14. Yeah, I mean, what can you do with that now? Nothing really. For his Joseph paid a generous salary of $14 a month for his services, more than the monthly wage earned by workers on the canal, plus room and board. Oh, so that was a lot of money. These and other details of Joseph's money digging were revealed in affidavits and other documents generated by a trial held in March 1826. People of the State of New York versus Joseph Smith. I never know he went to court. In which the young scryer was hauled into court and found guilty of being a disorderly person and an impostor. Although Joseph had applied himself to scrying with vigor, dedication, and the finest tools of his trade, it seems that he had been unable to find Stowell's silver mine. Nor, in fact, during the previous 6 years he had worked as a money digger, had he ever managed to unearth any actual treasure. I wonder why. When this trial had come to light, a nephew of Stowell's had filed a legal claim accusing Joseph of being a fraud. The trial and the raft of bad press it generated brought his career as a professional diviner to an abrupt halt. He insisted to his numerous critics that he would mend his ways and abandon scrying forever. Only 18 months later, however, peepstones and black magic would again loom large in Joseph's life. Just down the road from his Palmyra home, he would finally discover a trove of buried treasure, and the impact of what he unearthed has been reverberating through the country's religious and political landscape ever since. One night in the autumn of 1823, when Joseph was 17, An ethereal light filled his bedroom, followed by the appearance of an angel who introduced himself as Moroni, and explained that he had been sent by God. He had come to tell Joseph of the sacred text inscribed on a solid gold plate that had been buried 1,400 years earlier under a rock on a nearby hillside. He then conjured a vision in Joseph's mind, showing him the exact place where the plates were hidden. The angel cautioned the boy, however, that he shouldn't show the plates to anyone or try to enrich himself from them or even attempt to retrieve them yet. The next morning, Joseph walked to the hill that had appeared to him in the vision, quickly located the distinctive rock in question, dug beneath it, and unearthed a box constructed from 5 flat stones cemented together with mortar. Inside the box were the golden plates. In the excitement of the moment, however, he forgot that he was told the time for bringing them forth had not yet arrived. When Joseph tried to remove the plates, they immediately vanished into the ether, and he was hurled violently to the ground. He later confessed that greed had gotten the better of him, adding, "Therefore, I was chastened by the angel." Moroni was nevertheless willing to give Joseph another chance to prove his worthiness. The angel commanded the boy to return to the same place each year on September 22nd. Joseph dutifully obeyed that every September he was visited by Moroni on what would later be named the Hill of Cumorah. Alexa, how do you pronounce Cumorah?
Okay, here's pronunciations. I would pronounce it as Cumorah.
Alexa, stop. Yes,
I would
the hill.
pronounce it as Cumorah. By the way,
Alexa, stop. Alexa just be wanting to keep talking and talking. Okay, let me read that over. Joseph dutifully obeyed, and every September he was visited by Moroni on what would later be named the Hill of Cumorah to receive instruction about the golden plates and what God intended for him to do with them. On each occasion, Joseph left empty-handed to his greater disappointment. During their annual meeting in 1826, though, Moroni gave him reason for renewed hope. The angel announced that if Joseph would do right according to the will of God, that he might obtain the plates the 22nd day of September next. And if not, he never would have them. By gazing into his most reliable peepstone, Joseph further learned that in order for him to be given the plates, God required that he marry a girl named Emma Hale and bring her along on this next visit to the hill in September 1827. Emma was a neighbor of Josiah Stowell's in Pennsylvania, whom Joseph had met a year earlier while searching fruitlessly for the silver mine on Stowell's property. During the initial encounter, Emma and Joseph had felt a strong spark of mutual attraction, and he made several trips to the Hale home to ask for her hand in marriage. On each occasion, Emma's father, Isaac Hale, strenuously objected, citing Joseph's disreputable past as a money digger. Mr. Hale pointed out to his love-struck daughter that only a few months earlier, young Joe Smith had been convicted of fraud in a court of law. Joseph grew despondent over Hale's dogged refusal to let Emma marry him and desperate. September was fast approaching. If he and Emma weren't betrothed by then, Moroni would withhold the golden plates from him forever. Borrowing a horse and a sleigh from a fellow scryer, Joseph made one more trip to Pennsylvania, and on January 18th, 1827, he persuaded Emma to defy her father and run away with him and elope. Wow. I wonder if she knew what she was getting herself into when she decided to go run away with this man. I wonder if she realized that she was going to be stuck with him and all his wives and all his visions and all this other stuff. 8 months later, shortly after midnight, on the appointed day, Joseph and Emma went to the hill Cumorah. After being denied the plates on his previous 4 visits, this time Joseph left nothing to chance. Carefully adhering to the time-honored rituals, the young couple were dressed entirely in black and had traveled the 3 miles from the Smith farm to the hill in a black carriage drawn by a black horse. High on the steep west slope of the hill, Joseph again dug beneath the rock in the dark of night, while Emma stood nearby with her back turned to him. He soon unearthed the stone box that he had been prevented from removing 4 years earlier. This time, however, Marani allowed him to take temporary possession of its contents. The box contained a sacred text written on golden plates, giving an account of the former inhabitants of this continent, which had been hidden on the hill for 1400 years. Each of the gold pages on which this sacred narrative was inscribed, Joseph reported, was 6 inches wide and 8 inches long, not quite as thick as a common tin. They were filled with engravings in Egyptian characters and bound together in volume, as the leaves of a book, with 3 rings and running through the whole. The stack of metal pages stood about 6 inches high. Joseph gathered up the plates and headed home with them. Later, 19 witnesses would testify that they had actually seen the Golden Book, as 8 of them swore jointly in an affidavit printed in the Blue Book of Mormon. Joseph has shown us these plates, which have appearance of gold, and we did handle with our hands, and we also saw the engravings thereon, all of which has the appearance of ancient words and curious workmanship. Here's the thing. I don't know how I feel about all this. Let's say it were true, because let's be clear, people have unearthed things and we call them artifacts and we look at them and read them and all those other things. I'm just questioning if really 19 people saw this, because we've seen how people will say that they've seen something and how sometimes witness testimony isn't something that can be trusted. So I'm hearing this and I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, is this really a thing? Like, did y'all really witness this man pull this thing out and see all that? You know, just wondering. Y'all tell me what you think. Although the next text was written in an exotic, long dead language described as Reform Egyptian, Marani had also given Joseph a set of interpreters, divinely endowed spectacles that would allow the persons wearing them to comprehend the strange hieroglyphics. By means of these magic glasses, Joseph began deciphering the document, dictating his translations to a neighbor named Martin Harris, who acted as his scribe. After 2 months of painstaking work, they completed the first 116 pages of translation, at which point the 2 men took a break. Marani retrieved the golden plates and the magic spectacles, and Joseph reluctantly allowed Harris to borrow the manuscript to show his skeptical, disapproving wife. Disaster then struck. Harris somehow mislaid all 116 pages. The prevailing view is that his wife was so furious that Harris had gotten involved in such nonsense that she stole the pages and destroyed them. Whatever became of the vanished translation, Joseph was devastated when Harris confessed what had happened. "Oh my God," Joseph exclaimed, "all is lost." It looked like his sacred mission had come to a premature end, with nothing at all to show for it. In September 1828, however, after much praying and contrition on Joseph's part, Marani returned the plates and the translation resumed initially with Emma Smith serving as scribe. Later, others shared this duty as well. It says, it's a footnote, the 116 missing pages have never turned up. Some evidence suggests that prior to his conviction, Mark Hoffman, the forger, who is now Dan Lafferty's cellmate at Point of the Mountain, had hatched a scheme to discover the long-lost text. Because Hoffman's forgery, taken at face value, would presumably have reflected poorly on Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon, the LDS Church would probably have paid him handsomely for the document, then hidden it in the president's vault with the other potentially embarrassing historical documents that the church leaders have thus far managed to keep away from prying eyes and scholars. Wow. But the angel hadn't returned the spectacles along with the plates this time around, so to decipher the Egyptian characters, Joseph relied instead on his favorite peepstone, a chocolate-colored egg-shaped rock that he had discovered 24 feet underground in the company of Sally Chase's father while digging a well in 1822. Y'all, when I hear some of this stuff, and I'm such a skeptic when it comes to Joseph Smith and all of that, it makes me wonder what people think of my beliefs. Because people may think, oh, she's crazy for believing in God. So I'm just listening to this and I'm like, oh, Joseph, these people are crazy for listening to this. And then some people may feel that way about me too. But either way, it's like a rock. Okay, let me stop. Because, yeah. I'll go down a whole rabbit hole with that. So day after day, utilizing the technique he had learned from Sally, Joseph would place the magic rock in the upturned hat, bury his face in it with the stack of gold plates sitting nearby, and dictate the lines of scripture that appeared to him out of the blackness. He would work at a feverish pace during the second phase of the translation, averaging some 3,500 words a day. And by the end of June 1829, the job was finished. Did he average that, or did the people who had to write the stuff that he was saying average that? Joseph took the manuscript to the publisher of a local newspaper, the Palmyra-based Wayne Sentinel, and asked him to print and bind 5,000 copies of the book, an uncommonly large printing for a self-published volume by an unknown figure, which indicates that Joseph had giddy expectations for how it would be received by the public. He intended to charge $1.25 per copy, not an exorbitant price by any means, but still about twice as much as most local wage earners made in a day. The skeptical publisher demanded $3,000 in advance to print the books, much more cash than Joseph could lay his hands on. As was his wont, when confronted with an apparently insurmountable hurdle, he sought divine guidance. God announced in reply that it was his divine wish that Martin Harris, Joseph, and the scribe pay the printer's bill. Speaking through Joseph, God told Harris, I command thee that thou shalt not covet thine own property, but impart it freely to the printing. What? And misery thou shalt receive if thou wilt slight these counsels, even the destruction of thyself and property. Pay the printer's debt. Previously, Harris had usually been putty in Joseph's hands, but his involvement with the translation had already cost him dearly. His wife had grown so exacerbated over his obsession with the Golden Bible that she divorced him. Harris thus balked at heeding the commandment when Joseph first presented it to him. In the end, however, a stern directive from God wasn't something Harris was prepared to ignore, so he reluctantly agreed to sell his farm in order to finance the publication. Are you serious? This man is able to come to you and basically act like God is speaking through him and telling you this, And as a result, you sell your farm to pay for something that you don't even know if you believe in? 9 months after the translation was completed, the 588-page book finally rolled off the press and went on sale in the printer's brick storefront in downtown Pomeria. Little more than a week after that, on April 6, 1830, Joseph formally incorporated the religion that we know today as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The religion's foundation, its sacred touchstone, and guiding scripture was the translation of the gold plates which bore the title, The Book of Mormon. Chapter 6. Cumorah. The authority that Mormons promised rested not only on its theology, it rested on an appeal to fresh experience, a set of witness golden tablets that had been translated into a book whose language sounded biblical. Joseph Smith instinctively knew what all the other founders of new American religions in the 19th century instinctively knew. Many Americans of that period, in part because of popular enthusiasm for science, were ready to listen to any claim that appealed to something that could be interpreted as empirical evidence. R. Lawrence Moore, Religious Outsiders and the Making of Americans. That's where that came from. Today, no less than in the 19th century, the Hill Cumorah is one of the holiest sites in all of Mormondom, and great multitudes of Latter-day Saints make a pilgrimage here. To a Utah Mormon accustomed to the 11,000-foot peaks of the Wasatch, I forgot how to say that word. Alexa, how do you pronounce Wasatch?
The mountain range in Utah is pronounced Wasatch with a soft...
Alexa, stop. The Wasatch, front-thrusting heavenward like the teeth of God over Temple Square, and the city of the saints. Cumorah's puny dimensions must come as something of disappointment, a mound of glacial scrapings left behind after the last ice age. It humps up no more than a couple hundred feet above the surrounding cornfields, and most of it is shrouded in a gloomy tangle of vegetation. All the same, this modest drumlin is the highest landform in the vicinity, and from its crest one can glimpse the office towers of downtown Rochester, 20 miles distant, shimmering through the midsummer haze. The summit is adorned with an American flag and an imposing statue of the angel Moroni. On the slope beneath his massive sandal feet, the unruly forest has been cleared and a broad swath of the hillside planted with impeccably groomed bluegrass. Somewhere on this part of Cumorah, 175 years ago, Joseph Smith dug up the golden plates that launched the Mormon faith. It's a steamy evening in mid-July, and more than 10,000 saints are politely streaming into the meadow at the drumline's base, on which rows of plastic seats have been set up to accommodate them. Immediately above the meadow, a multi-level stage, half as big as a football field, covers the hill's lower apron, surrounded by a still forest of 50-foot light towers. The elaborate stage lights and the Mormon throngs all materialized here every summer for the Hill Cumorah pageant, America's witness for Christ. So in Big Love, they go to this place. I'm guessing that the writers got that from this. Good to know. Which is due to begin at sunset. According to promotional materials published by the LDS Church, this pageant is America's largest and most spectacular outdoor theatrical event, a magnificent family-oriented production, replete with arresting special effects straight out of Hollywood, volcanoes, fireballs, and explosions with sound effects from the movie Earthquake. A prophet is burned at the stake. Lightning strikes the mast of a ship. A 5,000 carbon arc light star with FAA clearance appears at the nativity scene. Christ appears in the night sky, descends and teaches the people, then ascends into the night sky and disappears. The pageant, which has been staged here since 1937, is held for 7 nights every July and draws near capacity crowds each night. Admission is free. As dust settles, the soothing harmonies of the Utah Symphony Orchestra and Mormon Tabernacle Choir drift over the field from a concert loudspeaker. 2 squads of sheriff deputies direct traffic into pastures that have been transformed into vast parking lots. A surging tide of saints is now moving from their cars and chartered buses toward the seats, and as they traverse Highway 21 to reach the meadow beneath Cumorah, they are confronted with grim-faced clumps of anti-Mormon picketers. The demonstration, who belong to evangelical Christian denominations, wave hand-lettered placards and shout angrily at the Mormons. Joseph Smith was a whoremonger. There is only one gospel. The Book of Mormon is a big fairy tale. Mormons are not, all caps, Christians. Most of the Mormons stroll quietly past the ranting evangelicals, unperturbed without rising to the bait. Oh gosh, we're used to that kind of thing, says Brother Richard, a wide, cheerful man with liver spots and a comb-over, who brags that he has 28 grandchildren. He and his wife drove there in a 37-foot pace Arrow from Mesa, Arizona. This is their 8th visit to the pageant. Here's the thing, right? Let me put something there to mark where I'm at. I think that people spend too much time worrying about what other people got going on. Do I agree with this belief system? No. I just don't feel like them going to look at a pageant is a place where you want to picket. If you want to picket somewhere, do it at the place where they go to marry off, which you can't even really find. Like, do it when you go to the courts, and in some of the cases that we've heard already in this book where people are not given real time for their crimes. Do it in places like that. But to sit here and come all the way to this part of New York where they do this and you're picketing, it's just like, what? Like, leave the people alone. Those are my thoughts. Tell me yours. Come the judgment, we'll see who winds up in the celestial kingdom and who doesn't, Richard muses. But just between you and me, them folks waving the signs is the ones that should be worried. As this thought escapes his lips, the glint in his eyes momentarily vanishes, and his face giles face darkness with pity. The Lord allows everyone to choose for themselves whether to see the truth or ignore it. You can't force a man to heaven, even though it's for his own good. The LDS Church produces the Hill Cumorah pageant at no small expense. Although non-saints are encouraged to attend, and the church considers the flamboyant shows a powerful tool in its tireless efforts to convert the world, more than 95% of the people in attendance belong to the church already. Basically, the tithes that y'all send into the church all the time are helping to pay for this pageant. That's my thoughts on it. Mostly the pageant functions as a Mormon jamboree, an occasion for members of the tribe to gather at their place of origin and celebrate one another's testimonies of faith. The pageant has the energy of a concert, but without the drunkenness, outlandish hairdos, Brother Richard's comb-over notwithstanding, or clouds of marijuana smoke. People started arriving hours ago, to claim the best seats. While they wait for the show to start, families sprawl on blankets along the edges of the meadow, eating fried chicken and jello salad from plastic coolers. Clean-cut teenagers, shrieking gleefully, toss frisbees and water balloons in the gloaming. Order, needless to say, prevails. This is a culture that considers obedience to be among the highest virtues. The sun finally skids behind the horizon in an ozone-enhanced blaze of orange. A scrub Mormon elder in his early 20s walks out and leads the audience in a heartfelt prayer. A few seconds after he finishes, there's a fanfare of trumpets and lasers pierce the night sky with shifts of dazzling light. A thrill ripples through the crowd. Great bellows of fog roll across the lower Cumorah. Emerging from the mist, 627 actors. Good gracious. This is a big thing. 627 actors march onto stage, costumed as a curious menage, M-E-N-A-G-E, of biblical figures and pre-Columbian North Americans, some wearing headgear adorned with towering antlers. Suddenly, a disembodied voice, a stern baritone that sounds like it could be God himself, thunders from 75 loudspeakers. I wish I could use my son right now because his voice is... This is a true story of a people who were prepared by the Lord to be ready for the coming of the Savior, Jesus Christ. He came to them in the Americas, but their story began in Old War in Jerusalem. For the next 2 hours, for the next 2 hours, the audience is treated to a dramatic reenactment of the Book of Mormon. The narrative inscribed on the golden plates, translated by Joseph Smith as the Book of Mormon, is the history of ancient Hebrew tribe headed by a virtuous man named Lehi. Is it Lee or Lehi? In raising his large brood, Lehi, I think that's drummed into the heads of his offspring that the most important thing in life is to earn God's love. And the one and only way to do that, he explained, is to obey the Lord's every commandment. Lehi and his followers abandoned Jerusalem 600 years before the birth of Christ, just ahead of the last Babylonian conquest, and journeyed to North America by boat. In the New World, alas, long simmering family jealousies flared. Lehi had always favored his youngest and most exemplary son. Is it Nephi, N-E-P-H-I? So it shouldn't have surprised anybody when the old man bequeathed leadership of the tribe to him. But this infuriated Nephi's miscreant brother Laman, causing the tribe to split into rival clans after Lehi's passing. The righteous, fair-skinned Nephites, led by Nephi, and their bitter adversaries, the Lamanites, as the followers of Laman were known. The Lamanites were an ideal people full of mischief and subtlety, whose behavior was so annoying to God that he cursed the whole lot of them with dark skin to punish them for their impiety. See, this is the part of Mormonism that I always say that I have a problem with, because my skin color is not a curse. Now, don't get me wrong. Things have happened to people who look like me, but it's not a curse to be brown or to have a darker complexion or to have something other than what, they deem as pure. Shortly after the resurrection of Christ, according to the Book of Mormon, Jesus visited North America to share his new gospel with the Nephites and Lamanites, and to persuade the two clans to quit squabbling. Heeding his message for several hundred years, they united amicably as Christians and prospered. But the Lamanites began to backslide into unbelief and idolatry. An unbridgeable rift developed between the clans, and they fought each other with escalating violence. Tensions continued to build, eventually sparking a full-blown war that culminated around AD 400 with a brutal campaign in which the reprobate Lamanites slaughtered all 230,000 of the Nephites, which explains why Columbus encountered no Caucasians when he landed in the New World in 1492. Facing starvation, the handful of Nephite children clinging to life at war's end were forced to cannibalize the flesh of dead family members, but in the end, they too succumb. The victorious Lamanites survived to become the ancestors of the modern American Indians, although eventually these red sons of Israel lost all memory of both the Nephites and their Judaic heritage. The leader of the Nephites during their final doomed battles had been a heroic figure of uncommon wisdom named Mormon. The last Nephite to survive the genocidal wrath of the Lamanites was Mormon's son Moroni, whose account of the Nephites' demise made up the final chapter of the Book of Mormon. The same Moroni would return as an angel 14 centuries later to deliver the golden plates to Joseph Smith, so that the blood-soaked history of his people could be shared with the world and thereby affect the salvation of mankind. The Book of Mormon has been much derived by non-Mormons since before it was even published. Critics point out that the gold plates, which would presumably prove the book's authenticity, were conveniently returned to Moroni after Joseph completed his translation, and they haven't been seen since. Scholars have observed that no archaeological artifacts with links to the supposedly advanced and widespread civilization have ever been found in North America or anywhere else. As history, moreover, the Book of Mormon is riddled with egregious and anachronisms anachronisms. I know I'm butchering that. And irreconcilable inconsistencies. For instance, it makes many references to horses and wheeled carts, neither of which existed in the Western Hemisphere during the pre-Columbian era. It inserts such inventions as steel and the 7-day week into ancient history long before such things were in fact invented. Modern-day DNA analysis has conclusively demonstrated that American Indians are not descendants of any Arabic race, as the Lamanites were purported to be. Mark Twain famously ridiculed the Book of Mormon's tedious quasi-biblical prose as a chloroform in print, observing that the phrase "and it came to pass" is used more than 2,000 times. But such criticism and mockery are largely beside the point. All religious belief is a function of non-rational faith, and faith by its very definition tends to be impervious to intellectual argument or academic criticism, which is part of the reason why when I was reading, I was saying there are people who would probably think that my belief is crazy. So I'm just, sitting here thinking, yeah, we're all crazy to somebody. Polls routinely indicate, moreover, that 9 out of 10 Americans believe in God. Most of us subscribe to one brand of religion or another. Those who assail the Book of Mormon should bear in mind that its veracity is no more dubious than the veracity of the Bible, or the Quran, or the sacred texts of most other religions. The latter texts simply enjoy the considerable advantage of having made their public debut in the shadowy recesses of the ancient past and are thus much harder to refute. In any case, like a movie that is panned by New York critics, yet goes on to become a huge blockbuster in the Hitherlands, the tremendous popularity of the Book of Mormon makes it impossible to dismiss. The sheer quantity of copies in print, at last count over 100 million, lends the book a certain gravitas, even among cynics. The numbers speak eloquently to the book's power as a sacred symbol and its raw narrative force. The simple truth is, the Book of Mormon tells a story that multitudes have found compelling and continue to find compelling. As the swarms who flock to the Hill Cumorah pageant every July attest, in early 19th century America of previous civilization, ruins such as the many Indian burial mounds near Joseph's home everywhere, the Book of Mormon explained that the origin of these ancient tumult in a way that put it neatly with both Christian scripture and a theory then in wide circulation, which posted that the American Indians were descended from the lost tribes of Israel. Joseph's book worked both as a theological and literal history of the New World. To an awful lot of people, the story makes perfect sense. Joseph began winning converts almost immediately after he received the plates from Moroni, well before the book was printed and made public. The excitement conveyed by Martin Harris, Joseph's parents and siblings, and others who swore they had actually seen the Golden Bible convinced their friends and associates to become Mormonites, as the Latter-day Saints were initially called. When the Mormon Church was formally established in April 1830, it claimed some 50 members. A year later, the membership exceeded to 1,000, and fresh converts were arriving all the time. Subsequently, awed that God had chosen Joseph to receive the golden plates, converts had no trouble believing his assertion. His assertion, I'm making up words. His assertion that his new religion was the only true living church upon the face of earth, or that the Book of Mormon was an essential update to both the Old Testament and the New Testament. They were taught that it was an even newer testament, which provided a more accurate and complex account of sacred history. Joseph explained that in the first century, after the crucifixion of Jesus, the Christian leadership had taken a wrong theological turn and had led the church astray, calling this blunder the Great Apostasy. He said that virtually all Christian doctrine that had developed thereafter, Catholic and Protestant alike, was a whopping lie. Wow. Fortunately, the Book of Mormon would set the record straight and restore the true church of Christ. There was an appealing simplicity to the book's central message, which framed existence as an ambiguous struggle between good and evil. There are two churches only. One is the church of the Lamb of God, and the other is the church of the devil. Wherefore, whosoever belongeth not to the church of the Lamb of God belongeth to the great church, which is the mother of abominations. The Book of Mormon appealed as well because it was so thoroughly American. Most of its narrative was set on American continent. In one of the book's most important moments, Jesus Christ pays a specific visit to the New World immediately after his resurrection to tell his chosen people, residents of what would become America, the good news. Moroni delivers the golden plates to quintessentially American prophet Joseph, who later receives a revelation in which God lets it be known that the Garden of Eden had been located in America. And when it's time for Jesus to return to earth, he assures Joseph that the Son of Man will be making his glorious arrival in that same corner of America. But perhaps the greatest attraction of Mormonism was the promise that each follower would be granted an extraordinarily intimate relationship with God. Joseph taught and encouraged his adherents to receive personal communiques, communiques, straight from the Lord. Divine revelation formed the bedrock of religion. God, of course, regularly communicated with Joseph as well as his followers. The imparting of Heavenly Father truth began with the Book of Mormon, but by no means did it end there. The Lord routinely issued commandments to Joseph, continually revealing sacred principles that needed to be revised or changed outright, which is the same thing that happened to Warren Jeffs and other prophets, right? They kept getting revelations that had them changing things and bounding people. Indeed, the notion that each Mormon prophet receives guidance from an ongoing series of revelations was and remains one of the religion's crucial tenets. These revelations are compiled in a thin volume titled The Doctrine and Covenants, which in some ways has supplanted the Book of Mormon as the Latter-day Saints' most consequential scripture text. With these revealed scriptures guiding the way, Joseph made his divine mission known. His job was to reinstate the Lord's one true church and thereby prepare the earth for the second coming of Christ, which was surely imminent. Joseph explained to his rapt followers that they were the Lord's elect, God's own peculiar people, the true sons and daughters of Israel, and every one of them would be called on to play a crucial role on the last days before the millennium drew nigh. They were Joseph's declared Latter-day Saints. And that is where we're going to end reading. Sorry about the mispronunciation of words. Y'all know how I do. I try, I spell, and I keep it moving. That was a lot of history, but I appreciate it. I don't think I'm going to have to put a warning up on this one just because the worst thing that I heard was the cannibalism. And I think that's a little bit, it's not palatable, but I don't think that's as triggering, like, as some of the other things that we heard, even though it's disgusting. Maybe I should put up a warning. I wish this was live so I could ask y'all what y'all think. Anyways, thank you guys so much. Let me know what you thought of the 2 chapters that we read. Until next time.